We're studying, we began studying, we continue studying the Rashba with regard to the sugya in Shabbos Daf Chav Gimel Amid Beis. You have enough money to buy either yayin for Kiddush or shemen for Ner Chanukah. The Gemara records that Rava vacillated back and forth which should take precedence until he finally concluded that shemen l'Ner Chanukah should take precedence because of the great mitzvah of Persume Nisa. So the Rashba raises the following question. He says, well, what's going on over here? The mitzvah of Kiddush is a mitzvah d'oraisa. The mitzvah of Ner Chanukah is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Certainly a mitzvah d'oraisa would override a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Why did Rava vacillate about this point? And furthermore, why did he conclude no, that Persume Nisa overrides Kiddush when Kiddush is d'oraisa? So the Rashba answers that we're talking about a case where he has pas, and therefore he has two choices. He could either make Kiddush ala pas, or he can make Kiddush ala yayin. Now, if he has two choices, then what's the whole Gemara's issue over here? I mean, obviously, he could make Kiddush ala pas, and he could fulfill his mitzvah of Kiddush ala pas. Why do we have to even raise the question of forfeiting the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah? He doesn't have to forfeit the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. He could buy shemen for Ner Chanukah, and at the same time, as we say in English, have your cake and eat it too. You can fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush ala pas, and that's an option. And then go ahead and spend your last dime on shemen l'Ner Chanukah. Why did the Gemara think that it's an either-or situation if you have pas? So the Rashba answers that even if you have pas, nevertheless, there's a mitzvah min hamuvchar to make Kiddush ala yayin. Now, exactly what mitzvah min hamuvchar means, the simple translation would be that it's a hidur mitzvah. But I'm not sure that those two terms are identical. There's something called a hidur mitzvah, which the Gemara derives from Zeh Keli V'Anvehu. And then there's something called a mitzvah min hamuvchar. I'm not sure that they're both the same. For example, the poskim talk about what comes first. Zriza makdim l'mitzvahs, in other words, to do the mitzvah at the earliest time, or to do the mitzvah behidur. Like, let's say, for example, I have to delay the mitzvah to wait for the possibility of hidur, but in doing so, I sort of push off the fulfillment of zrizus, of zriza makdim l'mitzvahs. So the poskim pretty much come to the conclusion that the earliest possible time to do the mitzvah, that takes precedence. Don't delay doing the mitzvah. In fact, one of the poskim says because you don't know how long you're going to live. So leave out the hidur mitzvah and urgently fulfill the mitzvah at the earliest possible time. And therefore, for example, Moshe Rabbeinu delayed Mila of his sons because he didn't have the proper utensil, and the mitzvah of Mila l'chatchila apparently is to use a metal utensil, like a knife or what's called barzel, and he was waiting to acquire that, and therefore he pushed off the Mila so he could be Mekayim the mitzvah behidur. But Tzipora had a different view. And of course, your wife is always right. And she said that we have to do the mitzvah right now. You can't delay it. So she took a tzur, which is a stone that had a point to it, and she did milah. So some of the poskim say, well, what was Moshe Rabbeinu thinking about that? He was willing to push off a mitzvah for the sake of Hidur? And those poskim who raise that question are of the opinion that we never push off a mitzvah, even for the sake of Hidur. So I saw, again, I'm leaving out all the research that I did on this, but I saw in some of the poskim, they say that Moshe Rabbeinu thought that the preference of Barzel as an izmul, to use as a cutting knife for Milah, is not just Hidur mitzvah, but it's mitzvah min muvchar. And that should take precedence even over Zrizus, over mitzvah b'shaita. So that it comes out that the poskim understood that Hidur is one concept and mitzvah min muvchar is another concept. In any event, getting back to our Rashba, the Rashba says that the reason why you would spend your last dime on Yayin for Kiddush, giving up on Shemen for Ner Chanukah, is because that's a mitzvah min muvchar. That was the original thought process of Rava when he vacillated back and forth. What should come first? So again, we're talking about a case where he has pas. As far as the Torah law is concerned, you could be makayim the mitzvah of Kiddush al pas. However, there's a mitzvah min muvchar to make Kiddush al yain. And Rava thought that maybe that mitzvah min muvchar would be more important than Shemen l'ner Chanukah. And the final conclusion is no, that Shemen l'ner Chanukah is on a very high level. It has what we call an adifus. And the reason for that is because Ner Chanukah has Persume Nisa. So let's just summarize 3 rules according to the Rashba. I call them Shlosha Klolim. Klal number 1 in the Rashba is that if you don't have neither Yayin nor Pas, and you only have enough money, it's Shabbos Chanukah, you only have enough money to buy either Yayin or Pas on the one hand, or Shemen l'ner Chanukah on the other hand, then hands down, you will buy Yayin or Shemen or Pas, whichever you choose, and you would forfeit the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. Because then the Rashba holds you're not makayim the mitzvah doraisa of Kiddush, Zachris Yom Shabbos Kadsha. You needed the Yayin or Pas, and certainly a mitzvah doraisa will override a mitzvah d'Rabbanan of Ner Chanukah. No matter how significant that mitzvah is, it's only d'Rabbanan. So that's klal number 1. Klal number 2 is, let's say you have Pas, and you could make Kiddush al Pas and fulfill your mitzvah d'Oraisa al Pas. You don't need Yayin. But there's a preference for Yayin over Pas. And in this case, Persume Nisa kicks in, and you will spend your last dime on Shemen l'ner Chanukah rather than achieve the mitzvah min muvchar of Yayin over Pas. So you'll make your Kiddush on Pas. You fulfilled your mitzvah d'Oraisa, that you covered on. You forfeit the mitzvah min muvchar of Yayin for the sake of Persume Nisa of Ner Chanukah. That's klal number 2. And we tried to explain what was the havamina of Rava, that maybe the mitzvah min muvchar of Yayin over Pas would override the mitzvah Ner Chanukah. What was his thinking when he vacillated originally back and forth? And we suggested that maybe mitzvah muvchar is one notch higher than Hidur mitzvah. But that has to be explained. I mean, what does that mean? When do you determine that it's Hidur mitzvah? When do you classify it as mitzvah min muvchar? If those two terms are not identical, and what makes mitzvah min muvchar so powerful that it could override a mitzvah d'Rabbanan that has the Malyusa and is so powerful that it has Persumenis? Well, let's leave that for now. Hopefully we'll come back to it. And now we go on to klal number 3. The Rashba says that it's clear in the Gemara that the only reason you'll spend your last dime on Shemen l'ner Chanukah is because of Persume Nisa. But if, let's say, there were another mitzvah d'Rabbanan, that does not have that extra bonus, that extra element and malyusa of persume nisa, then the law would be that you spend your money on yayin because of the mitzvah min muvchar of yayin, even though you have pas, and you'll forfeit the mitzvah which is the rabbanan that doesn't have the malyusa, that doesn't have the extra dimension of persume nisa. Let's give a couple of examples. Lulav, when I say lulav, I mean dalamidim on the second day of Sukkot and on. Somebody has to mute them. I'll try to do that. Oh, Baruch Hashem, I was able to do that. And now we're talking about lulav kol shiva. Kol shiva means, with the exception of the first day, the Torah commands us to take the lulav on the first day. The rest of the days is a takon of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, zecher, lemigdash, because in the migdash they took the lulav, v'smachtum v'nei Hashem l'kech v'shivas yom. Or let's say Marror. Marror in our time is only d'Rabbanan, because the mitzvah of Marror is mandated by the pasuk al matzos umrov yochlu, in which case that Marror is part and parcel of the mitzvah of Pesach. We don't have Korban Pesach today, and therefore we're left with Marror as a zecher, as a d'Rabbanan for remembering what it was like when the Mikdash stood. So now it comes out according to the Rashba. Let's say it's, Shabbos is coming around the bend, and it's the second day of Sukkot, or it's the day of Pesach is coming around, and I only have money to either buy Marror or lulav. Those are two different scenarios, or to buy yayin. So now we pit together one against the other. We have mitzvah min muvchar of yayin, the doraisa is mekayim on pas. Mitzvah min muvchar versus a regular rank and file mitzvah d'Rabbanan. So Rabbanan said that you should be mekayim the mitzvah of yayin over pas, and that's a rabbinic requirement. Call it mitzvah min muvchar. But the Rabbanan also said that I should be mekayim lulav or maror. So Rava vacillates back and forth, and the final maskana is that he will buy yayin. He will fulfill the mitzvah min muvchar. The only exception to that rule is Ner Chanukah, the Gemara says, because it has the additional element of persume nisa. Okay. Now, what I'd like to do is analyze this third klal, because the third klal, in my mind, is the most upsetting. I'm not comfortable with it. To give up on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan for a mitzvah min muvchar, with all due respect, we don't know why mitzvah min muvchar should be so significant, that Rava thought that it should override a regular mitzvah. And then Rava's conclusion was that if it's a mitzvah that has persume nisa like Shemen Shemin Chanukah, then it overrides the mitzvah of muvchar. But Rava, as the Rashba points out, leaves us with the conclusion that if it doesn't have that malyusa, that extra dimension of mitzvah and muvchar, of persume nisa, then we opt for mitzvah and muvchar, which means that I won't have enough money to buy a lulav. I won't have enough money to buy Marror for my Seder table. And I find this, to understate it, very uncomfortable. Give up on a mitzvah completely just for the sake of enhancing another mitzvah. However, we have to keep in mind that when we enhance the mitzvah of Kiddush, we're dealing with a mitzvah d'oraisa. Now, it's true that the Torah was perfectly happy with pas and does not require yayin over pas. But the Rabbanan said, no, we want yayin over pas. And that's going to be considered a mitzvah and a muvcha, but it's all a takonis chacham. So what was the havamina that it would override Ner Chanukah, and l'maskana it will override lulav or maror? But we have to keep in mind, as I indicated before, that Kiddush is doraisa. It's true. In this particular scenario, yayin is not doraisa, you have pas. But if you opt for yayin, you do everything you can to squeeze your last couple of dimes and buy yayin, then what you end up with is a mitzvah min muvchar on a kiyum doraisa. In other words, it's not that the Rabbanan are creating a brand new mitzvah unto itself to make Kiddush al Yayin. No, no, no. What the Rabbanan is saying is that you enhance the mitzvah that the Torah commanded you of Zochar Yom Shabbos Akacho by making the Kiddush al Yayin. So the Kiyum is Doraisa. And this should not surprise us. We have many examples of a Chiyuv D'Rabbanan with a Kiyum Doraisa. Many precedents where the Rabbanan tell you this is the way we want you to fulfill the Doraisa, and they make such a takana to fulfill that mitzvah in such a way, and by doing so, you achieve a Kiyum Doraisa. Like, for example, the Torah says, V'avadetem es Hashem Elokeichem, right? So you have to do Avodah Shebelev, and it requires tefillah, but the Torah doesn't tell me how to do tefillah, when to do tefillah. All that was established by the Chachamim. So we have a Nusach HaTefillah, Matpei HaTefillah, we have Zmanei HaTefillah, how many tefillahs we need every day. All that is the Rabbanan. But it certainly is a Kiyum Doraisa, because we're being Mekayim the mitzvah of Avodas Alev. Or Kriyat Shema, for example, Brachos, even something like Avelus. The Torah requires Avelus, but how and when and where, what is included in fulfilling that mitzvah of Avelus, that the Rabbanan are going to establish. And we could go on and on and on with many, many examples of how a Takana D'Rabbanan. Oh, I have a better example. Here, take the mitzvah of V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. What does that mean? Do I have to walk down the streets and kiss and hug everybody? Men, not women, obviously, Kalbach style, but you got to do it the right way. No, the Torah says, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. The Rabbanan are going to tell you how to fulfill that mitzvah. V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. You have Nicham Avelim, and you have Bikur Cholim, and you have Nachnosus Kala, etc., etc. These are Takonis D'Rabbanan, where the Rabbanan were mechayev you to be Menachem and Ovel, Rahman al-San, or to be Mavakar Achole. But once you do so, you're fulfilling and you achieve a Kiyum D'Oraisa V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. The Rabbanan are giving you the method to fulfill that mitzvah D'Oraisa. So the same thing here. When we call Yayin leKiddush a takonis chachamim, because on the Torah level you could make Kiddush al pas, what we're saying is the Rabbanan telling you that this is the way we want you to achieve the Kiyum D'Oraisa of Zochar Yom Shabbos Akacho. And the preference here is Yayin. So therefore, Rava had an idea that maybe such a high level D'Rabbanan, where the D'Rabbanan gives you the method of fulfilling the mitzvah D'Oraisa, that could override even a mitzvah like Ner Chanukah, with all its great dimensions of Persumei Nisa. L'maskana, Rava comes to the conclusion, no. That at the end of the day, the chiyuv here to make Kiddush al Yayin is only D'Rabbanan. The Torah is happy and satisfied with pas. You want to fulfill a D'Rabbanan? Don't override another D'Rabbanan that has the extra dimension of Persumei Nisa. But, as we said in the third klal, if you have a regular standard mitzvah like D'Rabbanan, like Marror or Lulav, which doesn't have any, it's stripped and devoid of any element of Persumei Nisa, then we go back to square one and we say that since the mitzvah and amuvchar of Yayin over pas, although it's D'Rabbanan, but it has the extra element of being a Kiyum D'Oraisa, that will override the mitzvah of Lulav or the mitzvah of Mor. Now, I had this pshat, and honestly, I could get away with it. Nobody will know the difference. It's a perfectly good pshat, but I'm not happy with it. Sometimes maybe it's a quirk in my personality. I look at things over and over again, and I change my mind, and I think I could have done better, and maybe this is not satisfying. It's not. So I was thinking over this shot, and I said, this doesn't make any sense to me. I'll tell you why. Again, not that it doesn't make any sense. As I said before, I could get away with it. Nobody would fault me for this pshat. But the reason I'm uncomfortable with it is that the Torah says make Kiddush. On one level, you can make Kiddush with Amiras Devarim Divrei Shevach, Kol Ish V'ish Lefitzachas L'Shono, the Rashba and the Tshuva that we mentioned many times. and I don't even need pas, I don't even need yayin. Okay, so the Torah now says we want pas or yayin. And even that is not absolutely critical. So you have pas and you're fine. So Rabbanan now step into the picture, they jump in and they say, well, we want to make a takana that even though you have the option of pas, we want you to use yayin. And Rabbanan label it as a mitzvah and a muvcha. And therefore I'm going to give up on another mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Watch what's going on over here. You have a fulfillment of the mitzvah of Kiddush in so many different ways. You know, you have Amiris Dvarim, and you have the bracha, and you have pas. Yeah, you have everything you want. And now you're striving for a higher element of mitzvah min muvcha. And therefore you're going to forfeit a mitzvah like lulav or like marror? So again, you know, I need your empathy here. I don't know if you empathize with my problem. Can anybody reiterate what bothers me? You know, I want to know if you're on board with me. You have to unmute yourself, I guess.
I hear what bothers you. What I wanted to say why it shouldn't bother you, or why I'm shut and why.
But first, if you don't mind, Bobby, just moving backwards a little bit, repeat if you regurgitate what bothers me, if you don't mind.
Well, in other words, what you're saying is that if we have a situation where you have a deraisa that you can be mekayim totally 100%, and the chachamim made an enhancement, let's say, to it, which was the chachamim decided to make that enhancement. Why would you then throw out a mitzvah d'Rabbanan totally in order to do the enhancement?
Excellent, Bobby. That's the key word I like here. Totally. Legamre in Hebrew, right? In other words, here are your two choices. You have one choice of fulfilling the mitzvah as the Torah wants it. The Rabbanan want to make a takana to enhance the mitzvah. But you have the mitzvah legamre. You're missing an enhancement. And now what are you going to do? The Rabbanan made a takana of lulav. The Rabbanan made a takana of marror. And the Rabbanan wants you to fulfill that mitzvah. You make a brach on that mitzvah. It's not just an enhancement. Okay, it doesn't have the great dimension of Persumei Nisa. But you're giving up on a derabbanan, on a mitzvah derabbanan? For the sake of what? For the sake of enhancing your mitzvah of Kiddush? Right. Yeah, Joe wanted to say something, Bobby, you'll give me an answer.
Bobby started. He wanted to say something first, so go ahead, Bob. And then okay.
Well, what I wanted to say was that perhaps we could say that when the Chachamim go to an enhancement in a deraisa, it's like it gets a status of deraisa, because they're basically saying it's not like a takana derabanan that we're going to say you have to do something like ab initio, as we would say. It's the idea is that you once the chachamim, like, you know, even, you know, let's say in this case has a pasuk zachreu al hayayin. In other words, it now takes on the chachamim have the koyach to make the deraisa, to make that enhancement like a deraisadik enhancement.
Okay, Bobby, if I can cut in for a minute, I had this thought, and I thought that maybe, you know what, the takana of Kiddush al yayin as a mitzvah and a muvchar takes on a ke'ein d'oraisa. It's like a quasi chiyuv d'oraisa, because it changes it enhances the nature of the d'oraisa. I'll tell you why I reject it. Because if that be the case, if you want to upgrade this takana of yayin to a ke'ein d'oraisa, then according to the Rashba, you would not buy shemen for Ner Chanukah. Why not? Because even after you upgrade Ner Chanukah to the level of Persumei Nisa, it's still bleibt the Rabbanan at the end of the day. Right. Once I jump up to the level of a mitzvah and a muvchar that the Rabbanan required you to get wine over pas as a doraisa or kein doraisa, whatever language you want to use, then I'm convinced that would override Ner this, we're in such a sensitive, narrow strait here. No matter where we walk and where we turn, we're in trouble. Because on the one hand, we admit that, we'd have to upgrade yayin over pas to such an extent that it could completely trump a mitzvah d'rabbanan. But on the other hand, we're not going to call it a doraisa, despite the fact that it's a kiyuv doraisa, because the kiyuv is only d'rabbanan. The Torah didn't obligate you in wine. And the reason why it's ke'ein doraisa is not sufficient to knock off Ner Chanukah. So we're caught in between Ner Chanukah and all the other mitzvahs. Yeah, Joe,
right, but I would say that in the same vein, Pirsume Nisa, it's like a Kiddush Hashem, which it's also in a sort of derisidic level.
Right. Yeah, it could be, but then you get into all sorts of issues about Lulav Kol Shiva. Is it also Ke'ein D'Oraisa Tikkun and Marror? Because I don't know. We're gonna have to really get into that.
No, because at the end of the day, when you do the mitzvah of Kiddush with Yayin, you're Mekayim D'Oraisa. You're never going to be Mekayim D'Oraisa with Lulav. Like, you can't say that lulav now gets the status of a kein deraisa. No, it's not, because lulav is only derabanan. You're never going to turn it into a deraisa.
But I just want to tell you this, Bobby. The idea that Pirsuve Nisa is Kiddush Hashem, I heard it from my Rebbe many years ago, but it's a little bit of a Kiddush. In other words, when you learn the sugya here, the impression you get is that we're dealing with the D'Rabbanan. We're dealing with the mitzvah D'Rabbanan. In fact, the Gemara itself asks the following question. It says we're on Chav Gimel Amid Beis in Shabbos, but if you turn back to Chav Gimel Amid Aleph, the Gemara says that the bracha you make on Ner Chanukah is Asher Kitzon Tzosah, and the Gemara says Vehechan Tzivanu, and that Gemara about Vehechan Tzivanu is the paradigm Gemara for how do you make a bracha on a mitzvah D'Rabbanan. The Torah didn't command you to light Ner Chanukah. The whole idea of lighting a Ner is all D'Rabbanan. The only Ner that's Doraisa is in Migdash, Baloschas HaNeros. So what do you mean, Vehechan Tzivanu, and now you're going to tell me, oh, it's Kiddush Hashem, Vehechan Tzivanu, Kiddush Hashem, I don't know. So, again, I don't reject what you're saying. I'm just trying to, I want to take the discussion slightly in a different direction. But Joe, you had something to say.
Well, I was just going to ask. What's that? Yeah,
I said you had something to say already a while ago.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering. We have the concept of when you're oskep mitzvah potem in a mitzvah. I don't know if you could bring that to this situation, even even to the extent that if you're davening and it's a derabanan, you're potter from tzedakah, which is deraisa.
Yeah, that's.
So I don't. In this situation, maybe because you have the ability, you're still working with this mitzvah of kiddush by buying this. This is the first thing. The lulav's not going to be coming. I don't know, till later maybe. So you take on, then it's not, that mitzvah is not even there. It's not like you're missing it. It's not in your. It's not for you to do right now.
Well, what do you mean it's not there yet? I mean, it's the second day of Sukkot, so I need a lulav, but I don't have the money to buy a lulav. Right. I don't have the money to buy Marror for my Seder. It's Erev Pesach.
When you bought the wine, you were osek in the mitzvah of Kiddush. So the mitzvah of lulav wasn't there yet. So you're putter from it because you're.
But Joe, what happens if it's the second day of Sukkot and it's Shabbos? So as I go into the second day of Sukkot, I have to obtain lulav and I got to obtain wine, or it's right. Erev Pesach shechalios b'Shabbos. I think we're familiar with that,
right?
We had it about a month ago, right?
Right.
So right now, I'm standing at Erev Shabbos. I got to buy yayin for Kiddush. I got to buy Marror for the night of the Seder. And I don't know if you could apply the principle of Osek Mitzvah Potter. I think we're dealing with two D'Rabbanans. And I would say, if you had a choice of two D'Rabbanans, better to give up on an enhancement than to give up legamre completely on a mitzvah D'Rabbanan. That's what I would have said. Anyway, let me tell you what I wanted to suggest, if you don't mind. And by way of introduction, I have to tell you that I had a discussion with my chavrusa on this topic. I presented my thesis, and he rejected it. So my chavrusa's name is Alan Dubin. I don't know if I ever mentioned him to you or if you happen to know him. His Hebrew name is Yehuda Dubin. So here's what I wanted to suggest. Again, reiterating this point as an introduction to what I'm about to present, that mitzvah min hamuvchar is much more than hidur mitzvah. And I tried to demonstrate that with the poskim who say that mitzvah min hamuvchar would override zrizos, meaning doing mitzvah early. You would delay the mitzvah for the sake of a mitzvah min hamuvchar. But my point is the following. Wherein lies the difference between hidur mitzvah and mitzvah min hamuvchar? So I want to introduce the following terminology. And I know, Joe, you like to write notes. I would very much encourage you to write the following. There are two concepts that should be differentiated one from the other. Number one is called a kiyum hagavra, and number two is called a kiyum bachefta. Let me explain. When we talk about mitzvahs, in general, we talk about a kiyum hagavra. What do I mean by kiyum hagavra? I have to do an action. The Torah tells me in 248 ways, what actions I should be involved in. And when I implement those actions, I achieve a kiyum hagavra. Now I want to introduce a brand new concept. And here's where my chavrusa was very resistant. And that's called a kiyum hacheft. Let me give you an example. And then I'll tell you why my chavrusa was not happy with it. You know that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was of the opinion that Ein HaPesach nechal ela ad chatzos, that the basar HaPesach has to be eaten by chatzos. So l'chora, the Torah commands me v'ochlos habasar b'layla zeh, and Laila, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, means ad chatzos. If I want to eat the Korban Pesach after chatzos, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, it would be meaningless. Comes along the Beis HaLevi, Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik, and he says, no, there are two kiyumim in Korban Pesach. One is the kiyum hagavra, the maisa achila, which has to be achieved according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah by chatzos, by midnight. But then there's a kiyum in the chefta, that the chefta should be, and I'm using that term very deliberately, this is the Beis HaLevi, a nechal. There's ochel and nechal. And although after chatzos, according to Rabbi Elazar, I cannot fulfill the achila as a kiyum hagavra, but I can fulfill a kiyum hachefta so that the chefta is nechal. And that mitzvah of chefta and nechal will continue up until the morning, daybreak, when it becomes nosar. But during that, let's call it 5 hours or whatever, 6 hours between chatzos and alos hashachar, or whatever it is, during those hours, it is a chefta of basar kodesh, of basar Korban Pesach. And I have to make sure that it's a nechal. It should be eaten up. And a Beis HaLevi goes even a step further. And he wants to suggest that even though we have a principle called Ein Achila Pachos Mikizayis, so for a Kiyum Chovas Hagavra, you have to eat a minimum of a Kizayis. Nevertheless, as far as the mitzvah and the chefta of being a nechal, even less than a Kizayis would be a mitzvah. albeit you would forfeit the mitzvah sagavra of the Ma'aseh Achila. It's not a Ma'aseh Achila, it's less than a kazais. But as far as the chefta is concerned, and he quotes a Gemara about the lechem haponim. The lechem haponim, after it was taken down from the shulchan on Shabbos to be replaced by another set, another batch, it was divided up amongst the kohanim on the mishmar. And the Gemara says that each kohen got kipul halavan. He got this much of lechem haponim. It's like, minuscule. So the Beis Halevi asked the obvious question, where it's less than a kazayas. So what kind of mitzvah did he fulfill? And he again suggests that the mitzvah is in the chefta to be a nechal. And I'll be honest with you, it occurs to my mind that if you were to give the basar of Korban Pesach or any zevach, or for that matter, lechem haponim to a katan, you would fulfill the mitzvah. Again, you forfeit the kovas agavra because the katan is a lav bar chiyuva. He's not obligated to mitzvahs, but he can generate a kiyum in the cheft of necha. So wait just one more minute. I wanted to suggest that maybe yayin, according to the Rashba, is not just an enhancement of the mitzvah of Kiddush to recite Kiddush al yayin, and you enhance your Kiddush, which is called a kiyum hagavra, but in addition, there's a kiyum in the cheft of the yayin. Why should there be a kiyum in the cheft of the yayin? The Gemara says in Erchin, Ein shira el al yayin. And the Gemara has a machlokes whether or not the mitzvah of shira applies only if you have a korban, or even without a korban on Nisach Hayayin. Meaning the Levium sing the song on the Nisach Hayayin. So I want to claim the following, that whether or not it's a kiyum in the cheft of the korban and you need a korban, or it's a kiyum in the yayin hanisnaser, the yayin that's being, what do they call, libations, whatever the word is. But everybody agrees that there's a kiyum in the chefta, whether it's the kiyum in the chefta of the korban that should be put up as primary, or a kiyum in the chefta of the yayin. And I want to suggest that if you make kiddush al yayin, what's the mitzvah in amuvchar? The mitzvah in amuvchar is to add another dimension of shir al yayin, and now I change the essence of the mitzvah. See if you can follow this. This is where I indicate mitzvah in amuvchar. We said that there are two types of kiyum. There's a kiyum in the gavra and a kiyum in the chefta. What the Rabbanan have established through this mitzvah amuvchar is to expand the mitzvah itself, that it shouldn't just be fulfilled with a kiyum agavra of the Ma'aseh Kiddush, but in addition there should be a kiyum in the chefta. And the nafkamina is going to be, when I change the nature of the mitzvah, that I upgraded to the status of a mitzvah that's different than every other mitzvah. So therefore you talk about lulav. Lulav is a kiyum in the gavra. You talk about marror, marror is a kiyum in the gavra. Achila, netila, whatever it might be, the ma'aseh gavra. But there's no kiyum in the chefta. The lulav doesn't beg and scream out, take me, take me. Or the marror. But in the case of Kiddush al yayin, the yayin, so to speak, don't take me literally, but the yayin cries out like the basar HaKodesh in the case of Korban Pesach or any zevach. Eat me, right, in the case of zevach, or in the case of yayin, drink me. The drinking of the yayin of Kiddush, Rabbi say this, if you accept this, it's mind-boggling because, what day of the week are we up to? We're up to Wednesday, right? Friday night, that's Wednesday, Thursday, that's 2 days from now. When you make Kiddush al Yayin, what Burzon is asking you to do is to have in mind that when you drink the Yayin, you are being Makayim the Shira on the Cheft of the Yayin. The Yayin itself becomes a Cheft of Shira, and you're drinking the wine is a Kiyum in the Yayin. So why was Alan so upset? So on the one hand, he was upset, he's a very hard guy to please because he says you don't need it, and if you don't need it, don't say it. He thinks you can get away with it without it. But more than that, he claims that a kiyum in the chefta only applies in the Beis HaMikdash. only applies to kachim. When you have kachim, there's a din in kachim in the heft itself of the basar that it should be a nechal. In fact, the Torah used the term basar te'achel. Te'achel means it should be eaten, shifting from the gavra to the heft. But he says to me, Berzon, where do you have a precedent for a kiyum hefta outside the realm of kachim? You're quoting the Gemara in Erchin. The Gemara in Erchin is talking about the yayin shenis nasech al gabi mizbeach. It's got a din of kedushas haguf. It's a carbon. It's not a full-fledged carbon of a zevach behema or an ola of oaf or whatever it is, but it's a hefta of yayin hanis nasech al gabi mizbeach. Yeah, that's a kiyum hefta. But to say that you take a bottle of wine, you go over to your refrigerator and you pour a bottle of wine, and that wine now takes on the status of a kiyum in the chefza, mehechetesi. Show me a precedent for such a thing. So I worked very hard on this, and I came up with a few possibilities of precedents. Now, there are a lot of Marror Makomos here that I have to give you, which I can't give you now, especially since my printer doesn't work. So I'm kind of looking at my document on this computer. There are two computers here. There's the laptop, and behind it there's the desktop. But it's very, very uncomfortable, very hard to do this. But anyway, there's a Gemara in Hashavas Aveda in Bab Metzia about finding tefillin. And the Gemara says that even though you wore tefillin on that day, and you're already makayim your mitzvah of tefillin, if you find these tefillin, you should wear these tefillin, even though you already wore tefillin. And I believe that now we have a precedent for a kiyum hachefta in tefillin. What do I mean? The hefta of the tefillin, since it's royal mitzvah, you wore a different pair of tefillin, but these tefillin are also royal mitzvah. We don't know who owns it. Cries out that I should be worn. Don me. So when I passed this by Alan, he didn't like it. Why? He says tefillin.
According to that, every time you see a pair of tefillin, you should put it on.
Correct. But you can assume that maybe somebody else put it on.
You know they haven't been worn. If somebody left tefillin somewhere or whatever, you know they haven't been worn, you should put them on.
Probably. That's what it means. And again, if we go through the Marror Makomos, we'd have to, flesh this out. But Alan said that that's no raya because tefillin is a hefta of mitzvah. It's not just, straps and leather and so forth and so on, but, it has a special status. So I suggested the following. Let's say you have a loaf of bread. So the Gemara has a machlokes in Masechta Brachos. Again, I'll give you the Marror Makomos another time if you'd like. What kind of bread should you make the hamotzi on? Should you dafka choose a shlema? And we're not talking about lechem mishnah on Shabbos. Or a prusa is fine. And there's one mandiyam who says you want to make a bracha on the shlema in order to do what's called bitzua hapas, to cut the bread. The kiyum of bitzua hapas is only on a shlema, once it's already broken into small pieces. So I want to suggest that there's a kiyum achefta as far as the gavra is concerned to make a bracha of amotzi lechem min haaretz. It doesn't matter whether you have a full untouched loaf of bread or you have pieces of cut bread. But as far as the chefta is concerned, if you hold that there's a kiyum bitzua, the kiyum bitzua is in the chefta. And if you want to achieve not just the chovas gavra of Maisa Bracha, but you want to also achieve that chovas chefta in the chefta of the lechem to make a bitzua in the lechem, then you take a shleim, and then you have a double mitzvah. So again, just because we're running out of time, I had a few other Marror Makomos I wanted to share with you, but just to get back full swing, why is it that for the sake of Yayin, even though he has pas, we will override the mitzvah of Marror? Again, I was going to use the word Trump, but then you're going to say I'm accusing you of wanting to be a 51st state. So I'm going to leave that out. But I don't know, if Ontario was a 51st state, I don't think I would mind so much. I only wish it would have happened when I went to Canada for 2 years, because it would have been a lot easier than to go through immigration, and all the legal issues. But anyway, I don't think Ontario is about to become a 51st state tomorrow, no matter what Trump dreams,
Alberta, maybe.
Maybe Alberta, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what I'm just suggesting is that you should prefer Yayin for Kiddush, not because of Hidur Mitzvah. Hidur Mitzvah would only enhance the Maisa Gavra. You want to enhance the Maisa Mitzvah, you do Hidur Mitzvah. I'm saying something else. I want you to change the mitzvah. I want you to expand the mitzvah. I want you to make an essential upgrade to the mitzvah by introducing Shira ala Yayin and making the Yayin into a Chefta of Shira with a Kiyum Chefta. So that now when you drink the wine, above and beyond the mitzvah of Kiddush, per se, as a Chovas Gavra, you now have established an additional Kiyum. There are now 2 dimensions to your mitzvah. And that's what's going to override even a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, like Marror.
Yeah.
Or like Lulav. Go ahead, David.
Okay, so to, shall we say, cut down on your Carusa's argument, you could point out that your shulchan is like a mizbeach. So it's like kudshim. It isn't kudshim, obviously, but the fact is shulchan is like a mizbeach. So the Indian of kudshim, right, even though it's not nitzchayim per se, there's still an Indian of it, regardless.
So, David, I just want to support what you're saying. I'm suggesting that if your shulchan is like a mizbeach, then basically when you drink the yayin of Kiddush, you're like almost pouring the yayin on the mizbeach.
Well, that's what I was trying to say, yeah.
Yeah. That's, I just want to just add to it.
You can tell your source, it's not divorced from kudshim completely.
Correct. That the idea of a kiyum chefta might go way beyond the confines of kudshim and Beis HaMikdash. We're not talking about something on the mizbeach per se, and yet there's a kiyum in the chefta. In fact, there's one mandiomer in Menachos regarding a talis, that if you have a 4-cornered tablecloth, let's say, you have to put tzitzis on the tablecloth.
Uh-huh.
And what I believe is that generates a kiyum chefta in the tablecloth. In other words, that's the Gemara calls it a chovas talis. It's a chova vis-a-vis the talis, that the talis should be equipped with dalet tzitzios. Okay, Ad Khan, thank you so much. And very good to see you, gentlemen. And have a great job. It's a great week.